All right. Thank you all for coming at the end of the day at NAB. I'm going to be talking about basically asset intelligence, something that we've built in conjunction with DreamWorks and expanded upon. All right. So it's been about 20 months now. We established a partnership with DreamWorks. And one of the things DreamWorks was looking at doing was building out an asset management solution for the artists, so working across the whole production pipeline. The reason why they hired us at Amdocs is they were very concerned with making sure that the artist's experience was good. And so we were brought in to basically talk to the artist, to understand the production management, and to really dive into basically what they would want to adopt and what they would want to use. One of the things I want to say about DreamWorks is they've got great technology folks. They've always been very artist focused. But they saw that they needed to really come in and make sure that the artists were listened to in this experience. One of the other things about this partnership is DreamWorks brought us in to help build this for them, but they also agreed to let us build something ourselves. And so what I'm going to be walking you through is basically how we've translated what we built for DreamWorks and how we're building it ourselves now. Also to note, we have DreamWorks with us in the audience, Doug Sherman. So if you've got any questions about what we've built for them, also what we're building on our own, he is here to answer those questions. All right. So, moving on. Okay, so how many of you guys are in the business of managing massive amounts of digital assets? Kinda? Okay. All right. So when you're at a studio, right, and you're developing a movie in animation, you pay the first time to create that asset. So there's a lot of time, a lot of energy that goes into doing that. What we found as we were going through this process is oftentimes you can't find the right asset. If you do find the asset, you don't know if it's approved. You don't know if it's something that has gone through compliance, all the things. And so even if you do find the asset, you don't know if you can trust it. And so you're paying twice to recreate it. And all of this happens like when we've gone out and talked to other studios, they're like, we spend days sometimes trying to hunt down assets. We don't know where they are. People have put their own metadata on those tags. They've tried, but you don't think like I think. And so my metadata tags are unique to me, right? And so people were lost and unable to find it. And just going in there more, assets are buried everywhere. So they're on Z drives, they're on hard drives, they're on people's personal computers. So you can't locate where the assets are. In addition to that, I also mentioned metadata without meaning. When folks do create metadata on it, it's really personal. And so it's not something that, say, I would go in and search. And so an example of that is if you're working with a partner studio, say, and you've tagged something like jeans, in Europe, they might call those trousers. And so say they go in and they search for trousers, they're not going to find those assets. And then finally, what we found is there was no single source of truth. So coordination is happening basically in spreadsheets, via DMs, meetings, all very expensive across the board. So we took this down and we started to think about it and break it down. And coming from an experienced firm, we found the biggest experience gaps, and I'm going to walk through each of them. The first one is the experience. So artists have no fast, intuitive way to search. You don't want your artists being archaeologists. You don't want them spending the time trying to find assets. You don't want them spending the time once they find that asset, figuring out if it's something that's approved or not approved. Assets are saved without context. So again, even when people do add context to assets, it's often context that is not meaningful to the next person down the road. I know, like, if you looked at my file system, some of the things I named things, very personal to me. And it would drive other people crazy, but it works for me. Ontology. So within a different department, you've got people, even within different parts of the production pipeline, different teams call things different things. And then if you start to look at different shows, they do the same thing. If you start to have partnerships with other vendors, they start to do that as well. Verification. So once you do find that asset, knowing if it's legally approved, knowing if it's compliant, etc. And then finally, visibility. So visibility, knowing basically what's happening in production, having to dig into spreadsheets, meetings, all of the above. So as we came into DreamWorks, they were already on this path. They'd already identified a lot of these problems, but we started to dig in on our own as too. And so you can talk to Doug about what we built at DreamWorks, but what we're going to be showing today is basically what we've built on our own. And we call it basically the asset intelligence layer. So we focused really in on the experience. So anyone can come in and they can search natural language search and it'll pull up the assets that are relevant to it. It's an automated metadata pipeline. So basically we built it to be tech agnostic. So it sits on top of any tech stack you have. Anytime any artist saves an asset, it gets scanned, the metadata gets applied and gets uploaded and saved. So there's no manual tagging. Artists can go in and change it, though. There is a review where once they get to their asset, they can say this is not right, and they can add their own things. A uniform vocabulary. Again, this is going to be unique to any studio or any production environment. And so this is something that is customizable. We work with our clients to make sure that this is pulls in their common DNA versus a universal DNA. We're very much of the belief that every company is different. We don't dictate that. Verification. So the approval state and provenance travels with that asset and gets updated as it goes through. So artists know when something is safe to use, not safe to use. And then finally, this creates visibility. So there are dashboards, approval, vendor handoffs, all built within the system. All right. So first thing is, I mentioned this before. We are 100% tech agnostic. We work within the cloud. We work with Amazon. There's no forced migration. Basically, we connect to anything that you've got in your studio or in your environment. We're definitely cloud native ready, but what this allows you to do is, because we're sitting on top of your stack, you can swap it out. We connect. You can make updates, and basically it will work with what we've built. Okay, so as we started building all of this, where we've started to go as far as a roadmap is an agentic pipeline. So as I've been working with the studio, assets are really the heart of what goes into making a movie. And what we found is that we started to layer in some AI to this. We started to do this, but we started to go a bit deeper. And I'll explain why. So I work for a company called Amdocs, and we'll go a bit deeper into this, but that's kind of why we're here. But we've got a lot of experience in this area. I'll dive into that a bit deeper. So in practice on this type of roadmap, and this is the kind of world that we're imagining and what we're starting to develop, is an artist makes a change. So an artist updates an asset. And because of the knowledge graph that we've got, the agent detects the modification, and you as a studio can set with us the cognitive core, the knowledge graph, that basically has sub-agents that automatically go out and do specific tasks. I've listed some tasks here of some things that some of the studios that we're working with are interested in. Some of them might be too far, right? And so it maps downstream dependencies. That one seems safe. We've got studios exploring spinning up new version lineage, so they're taking it a step further. But it can also flag and notify on budget and timeline impact, trigger legal or compliance, etc. So a lot of people are talking about doing this. And one of the things that I really want to go into is Amdocs, the company I work for. We've recently launched and developed an agentic operating system. Current telco providers around the globe are using this. So this is not something that we're talking about in theory. We are doing this for telcos that you're probably using, like T-Mobile is using this right now. So anything agentic that is going through them. So it's using this knowledge graph. So we are translating that technology that we have built through them and pulling it in and then working with partner studios to pull this into broadcasting, to pull this into media, to pull this into animation. So this is not something that a lot of people are talking about building an agentic production pipeline right now. This is something that we are doing in a different space, and we are mirroring what we've learned with the partnership with DreamWorks, mirroring what we're building and pulling it into technology that Amdocs has already built. And one thing I will say is we partner heavily with Amazon on this technology. So we're using a lot of the Amazon services to pull in behind this in this AOS solution. So a few things with AOS that it does. It enables end-to-end autonomous workflows that coordinate processes and decisions and handoffs across complex operations. It acts as the intelligence agents. So we've got up here, we've got the agentic operating system, and at the heart of it is the cognitive core, and that's where the knowledge graph lives. And the knowledge graph is where you as a company would come in and basically set the stage and tell us what you wanted those agents and sub-agents to do. And so while we're going to be developing some of that functionality, I want to say very clear, we come in and we understand what you want and need, and then we implement that on your behalf, and then we hand it to you to go in and manage. And so just looking forward beyond this, Amdocs also owns a company called Vubiquity. I don't know if any of y'all are familiar with Vubiquity. So Vubiquity, so we've been focusing on basically the production part of the pipeline with the project that we've been doing. What we're looking at now is as we're looking at putting together this agentic production pipeline, I've started to talk to my counterparts on their side, and we're like, hey, we've got all this technology that goes beyond production to post-production, localization, distribution, and monetization. And why don't we connect the dots? And so those are the conversations that are happening now, pulling it all together, taking all of what we've done, but still maintaining. Like, we want our customers to be able to come in and choose. Like, we don't want all of this. That's fine. We're not going to push it down your throat. You want a portion, you want a little bit of this, and come in and taste it. Like, that's how we build it. Basically, like, you can choose which portion of this you want to use. And then just the last thing. So we built this with an animation studio. What we started to build is highly customized to animation. But I can't say this enough. Amdocs Studios is very focused on coming in and understanding the customer that we're working in and servicing. This is something that with this back-end technology could be translated to any one of these things, but it's basically anyone who's got massive assets and complex workflows. Like, it's something that could come in and manage that. So I've talked too much. I'm going to hand it over to Sam, who's going to actually do the exciting part and walk through the demo.
Alrighty. So Liz did a great job explaining all of the technology that's behind the experience. What we have here is a video demo from the point of view of some of your end users, actually going through and benefiting and experiencing what an agentic pipeline can feel like and how that can speed up processes. So first, we're going to follow John. He's on the modeling team at a studio working on a show called Dragon's Legacy. He has feedback to work through. He has assets to compare, and he has no time to piece the story back together from scratch. Then we'll jump to Rico. He's on the production side. He's on the same show. He has a vendor request on the clock, and he needs to know what's actually safe to send or not. And then at the end, we'll come back and we'll see the moment a new file enters the system and how context starts getting built as soon as assets enter the pipeline. So across all of these moments, the question that we're trying to answer is the same. Can the system keep the meaning of the work attached as it moves from artist to artist, artist to production, production to other studios, handoff to other downstream departments as well? So this is John. He's logging back into work already in motion. And you can see already he's not starting clean. There are notes from review, there are assets in progress, and a thread he needs to pick up quickly. What we're trying to do is answer the question of how fast can our system help him get oriented without sending him through folders, through chat, through memory. And so as soon as he opens the system, we're already narrowing the field for him. We're prioritizing assets that he's recently touched, prioritizing assets that have feedback waiting on him, and we're showing, based off of the context that we know about him and his show, some other suggested assets that might be relevant. Now we're going to explore what's usually a very messy part, is managing feedback. Normally, this takes place in notes, in in-person meetings, where feedback and assets are living in totally separate systems, and the useful precedent or related assets live somewhere else entirely. Here, within the system, the feedback stays tied directly to the asset and the surrounding conversation, so John can move straight from what changed to what's next. And when he needs examples, they arrive in the same moment. They're intelligently suggested by our system based off of the context of the feedback itself, the assets that has the feedback on it, as well as what we know about John, the user, and the person giving the feedback. So you can see part of the feedback recommended a specific asset. The system promoted that asset as part of a recommended suite of next steps to take. It also included some feedback on the variability of scales, and our system prompted with some useful assets to build off of that. Now, once John understands the note, his unit of work starts to expand. It goes beyond just one file. He's starting to think in clusters now: hero models, characters, scene pieces. And we introduce the feature of collections, and collections are meant to match the way that the work actually comes together over time. In this case, we're not just returning the assets directly to him, we're helping him create a working set around his tasks, so the context can survive beyond one search or one session, one user, one show. So it gets to build a resource that can be reused in the future. Next, he's going to jump into our search functionality, which is Explore. And here's when he can find assets where he may know maybe the neighborhood of where it might exist. He may know a rough example of how he might describe it, but he doesn't know the exact address. Everybody's Explore page is going to be customized to him. So we have promoted assets here that are going to be different than what another user might see, because these ones have feedback directly addressed to John. So you can jump at any time back into the most important asset. On the right, you'll see him scrolling through the info panel. This promotes important context about the individual asset right to the front without forcing him to open it in a DCC tool like Maya or Photoshop. So before he loads that directly into one of those large tools and starts that process, he can make sure at a glance that this is the right version. He can see who touched it last. He can see any relevant feedback, and he can see a provenance chain of who created what changed over time. And all of this confidence, comes from the same background layer carrying things like recent conversation, review state, all into one place. Now we'll jump ahead into his workflow, turns from finding to actually arranging. So we'll watch John pull together the village set for a scene that he's working on to help kick off his team on a new scene. And within a few clicks, he has that working set, and that working set has a name and a place to live. It's no longer private scratch work. The collection is doing more than saving a list. It's actually turning John's local context into shared context that the rest of the pipeline can understand later. And with this, John can come back to it, and so can everyone else. And that's where reuse starts to become more trustworthy and intentional, besides just accidental. Here he's exploring some other collections. We also have a concept of smart collections, which are configurable filters that are dynamic in the sense that as soon as an asset hits the pipeline, it matches those filters, it'll automatically update the collection. And so we're removing the need for manual organization and tagging and handing that off to the system. Now we'll jump over to Rico, Rico's on the same show, but he's a production manager. He's got the same asset graph. He's got the same data, but he has very different pressure and priorities. His day is basically a queue of small risks that turn into huge headaches if nobody sees them in time. So he starts at the show level. He sees block department. He sees work due this week. He sees partner requests waiting, and he sees assets sitting ready for review. These are all what Rico has decided are most important for him to see at the start of his day and throughout the day. We can pull from the asset intelligence layer the relevant context and push it to the top of the list, so he doesn't have to spend time digging through status update, Google Sheets, Jira tickets, etc. He also doesn't have to spend time bothering his teammates to figure things out as well. So we're going to jump into the timeline view, and this answers a different question. It gives him a top-down view of the project broken down by milestone. It shows the past, the present, and the planned future of a project. It's not in somebody's recap. It's actually in the chain of dependencies following assets from development through shot production. And the asset intelligence layer is turning these asset and department signals into a production view, which is why Rico, the production manager, can reason about readiness instead of just inventory. Next, he's going to jump into the agent activity view. This is where he can look behind the curtain and see all of the actions that the agent is taking on their behalf. He can see what was classified, what was verified, what was routed, and why it happened. He can also look and see the moments where agents had to get corrected. This is useful for him so that he can understand where the system might need to be tweaked or updated, and also so the system can self-heal and learn to adapt to the individual studio's specific needs. Finally, we have an experience here to help manage partner and vendor studios. So while the asset intelligence layer will be set up and customized to the home studio or host studio, we've also allowed the host studio and per show rules to be created around how vendors and partners can or cannot access assets directly. So for example, you could allow your vendors to self-serve from a selected sandbox of assets. You could also, as we're showing here, give them view-only access and let them create requests. This feature functions sort of like a shopping cart on Amazon. The vendor can go in, they can search, they're in a sandbox environment, they can select as many assets as they need, and it'll put it all together into a bundle for the production manager to review in one place. This used to take hours to days managing email threads, chat threads, etc. Having all of the context here helps Rico spend less time organizing, wrangling, and more time getting his vendors unblocked. And now we get to the handoff moment. We have a partner, they need sequence 114, and the bundle is blocked. And this is where usually teams either slow down or they don't know it's blocked or why it's blocked. And so they make a bad send or can't move forward. But here the problem is explicit. The system knows what's ready, what's still under review, and what's holding the package up. There's a thread with context for why each individual asset is blocked or needs review. There's a package pre-assembled, and Rico can jump in and one by one make individual decisions based off of what action he wants to take per asset until the bundle is deemed ready to send. So instead of stitching the answer together across 3 different tools before he can act, he can go in and in a matter of seconds unblock his vendor and save time and create a record of what assets were sent to whom, when, with what asset. Alrighty, and now to wrap it up, we're going to go back to John. He's been working in the background on a beautiful asset. He's going to upload it. And we're going to see right away as the system processes the asset and begins to add context immediately. So you can see within a matter of seconds, the asset is put into context. It's got tags, and John has the ability to edit these. We're not forcing humans out of the loop by any means. We're creating better experiences for humans to move faster on the creative decisions that matter and spend less time archiving and searching. And what ties all of those scenes together is simple. There's less time spent reconstructing context. There's less time guessing at readiness, and the next asset arrives with enough structure to be useful before the cleanup work begins. In this system, we have 3 goals. We want our assets to stop acting like dumb objects and knowing what they are. We want to grow context over time and adapt to the individual needs of studios and shows. And we want to make sure your artists, your creative team, your production managers have more time to focus on the things that matter and less time managing folders, diving into Google Sheets, wrangling vendor requests, and more time on the fun, creative aspects of creating engaging stories.
So I'm just wondering, when this was implemented, was it for new projects only, or did it look backwards in terms of reviewing the archive and dealing with the...
You want to take that for the DreamWorks situation? Yeah.
Yeah, it's hello. So it's change management galore on this one. So one of the lures was that we had to make it, we called it the current lot before we called it the back lot, because the current productions were the first adopters of all the current assets, models, textures, curves, all that kind of stuff. But for some things like the models, it goes back 30 years and all of that's still utilizable. So for some, we got lucky. For some, like the surfacing decisions like hair and groom and all that kind of stuff, some of the stuff's compatible, but even archaeologically, if we can map out in Houdini how the materials came together and those choices, that's still highly valuable. And we're exploring now with AI, we can actually kind of maybe forward progress some of those older assets and repurpose them. And we're actually having some luck with that. So I think with AI, it's more possible than I ever thought it would be to reutilize some of those older assets. And now the library's exploded in popularity because of that. So
Yeah, there's a reduction in terms of like trying to flush out some of those path that I guess.
yeah. No, 100%. I'll be honest, like our archives we leave it on disk for an eternity and we just keep paying for that. So yeah, the hope for this is to minimize that and actually get some kind of controls on so archiving for us has always just been a fantasy, and now it can actually be possible for us. So yeah, 100% we're doing that. And then, like you said, we don't have to keep n number of versions of things. We can keep explicit versions for how-tos and specifically the final assets. And then, yeah, I'll be honest, there's been times we've redone assets because it's just easier to redo them than try to find them, which is really sad. So we don't have to do that anymore, especially for sequels. So yeah, we're definitely getting past that. So, but I mean, the biggest thing that there was their help in all of this was, I don't want to underscore the change management as much as this stuff's all valuable and it was hugely successful. Studios have traditionally not invested in UX at all. And technology teams like my own would just kind of go out and try a thing and hope the artist cared. And going artist first this time was everything. All the UI, everything that they've done has all been from talking to department leaders and VFX soups and making them sort of the focal point. And then from that, we would get the requirements. And so much better. They do well. So there's different ways to do this. The system that they've built, I think you can upload the asset and then transport it. For us, right now, we've left everything in place. That's more political. I would like to move them centrally, but right now people are like, don't move my stuff. Let it stay where it is. So we're like, okay, that's fine. So that UI is more of a reflection of the truth and an easier way to find it. But we do a duality of disk plus that.
Yeah. And what we built is they have the option to upload, but we have real-time scanning that can scan anything where you define to scan. And so as something gets uploaded, you don't have to think about uploading it to our system. It scans and captures it itself. So all of that is customizable by the studio.
Yeah.
You think this type of technology unlocks the participation layer of IP?
Expand on that.
If you have the ability to structure the data at this level and this granularity, can't you then allow for legacy IP that's been favored by people for 100 years to now make derivative works because those rights are kind of open?
Yeah. I mean, I would say so. I would say it would depend on the business case that you're going in and doing. But yes, this technology would open that up if that was the intent. That is something, though, I would want to come in and understand the intent and explore it, because there would definitely be adjustments to how we would present and what we would present. But that's what I love doing. Like, I love coming in and understanding why you're doing what you're doing. So then we can adjust. We built this to be completely flexible, and so we can accommodate different things like that.
So part of the value of this too is that for us, we've got a television division, we've got a theme park division, because now we're owned by Universal. So surprisingly, well, maybe not surprisingly, a lot of the theme park people are like, "Where's your stuff?" And we're like, So this is like something now or if there's a TV spinoff, they can immediately take those assets, video game franchises, all that kind of stuff. It's finally accessible. Because before it was just somewhere on disk. If you're on the production, you knew where it was. And yeah, that's transformative now that you know, and because we can take it in the current formats that they are, and make a less poly version for a video game or something like that, or a television spinoff. So it's cool.
All right, let's give a great hand to Sam and Liz.